next session is From Principle to Port, testing the real-world impact of the IMO Places of Refuge guidelines. Very privileged to introduce Alan McKinnon, who is the Chief Claims Officer of the UK Club. He's going to moderate this session, which again means I can put my feet up. So I will leave you in the capable hands, Alan, who will introduce his esteemed panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We had Ted Lasso earlier. I just want to say I was on a flight earlier in the year, and the attendant addressed me as Mr. Tucci. So she was so disappointed when I told her what I really did. But never mind. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming back so promptly. The post-lunch slot is always a bit of a graveyard slot, but I don't think that is the case on this occasion, where we have an excellent panel and we have a very interesting subject to talk about, being the IMO Places of Refuge guidelines. I kind of think that these are a bit like wind farms, solar panels. Everyone thinks it's a really good idea until it's happening on your doorstep. And it is, let's face it, it's a very difficult balancing act between state and ship. I expect in this room we have a united view that we probably think that the guidelines are not universally being followed. We're probably quite frustrated by this. Stefan Hennick has often quoted the line that nothing at sea gets better without intervention, and that's absolutely true. We at the UK Club have had two recent experiences of this, and we've found too often that states seem to be paying lip service to the guidelines or going through the motions. But are we preaching to the choir? Are we an echo chamber? The majority of us, if asked, would think that the guidelines are a good thing. But is it really realistic to expect a state to always be ready to accept a ship that is still smouldering or threatening to do so, particularly in this media age, in the age where you get headlines about judges calling them enemies of the people? Is it realistic for a state authority employee to take that very difficult decision and then live in the locality where everything is going on? So, do we need to be realistic about these guidelines? They use the words highly desirable, and maybe that is all that it is. Do we have to be more patient? It's very easy for us to always take out our frustrations against a state, but is there more that we can do to speed up the process? Going further, is it right that these are just guidelines? Should there be obligations? But could we enforce those guidelines, those obligations, if they were so? So, all of that and more. We have a very high-octane panel, I would say, to discuss these issues. Starting on my immediate right, Jakob Terling, the policy man. I would say he is Mr. Port of Refuge, Place of Refuge. 30 years experience in maritime safety with the European Commission, the European Maritime Safety Agency, and Swedish ship owners. So he's seen it on both sides, if you like. He's the chair of the EU expert group on places of refuge, heavily involved in the, I think these are his words, I think he's being modest, I think he virtually wrote the 2023 revision of the IMO guidelines. We have got the screen updated. Some of you might have been expecting Nick Haslam. Nick, unfortunately, is unwell, unable to join us, but we have a younger and probably better-looking equivalent in Will Lashave. Will joined Brookes in 2020. He's a maritime consultant. He's worked for Lloyd's Register, Masters in Naval Architecture, specialising in total losses, cargo losses. He's a Lloyd's-listed SCR, wreck removal experience. He's attended on site. We've used him. We know he's good. And I'm sure he's got lots to say from the consultant point of view. We have the Salvage, we have Charo Coll, I think probably who needs very little introduction to most of you, but for those who haven't come across her before, 30 years experience of shipping industry with Boluda Towage Corporation. She's the former president of the ISU, chairman of the European Tug Owners Association, so obviously will be giving us the panel, the Salvage view. And then finally, for the insurer's point of view, last but not least, Helga Hodne, who is a hull insurance specialist. She manages complex claims for Skuld. She's chair of the IUMI Salvage forum and contributes to many global discussions on marine casualty response and best practices. So we're in good hands. What we're going to do is we're going to set the scene with two quick presentations. Jakob is going to give us an introduction to the EU Port of Places of Refuge framework and the IMO guidelines, how they operate in practice. And then after that, Will is going to give a presentation showing some real-life emergency scenarios and how incidents have unfolded and how the guidelines have come into play in those cases. So enough from me. I think I'll hand over to Jakob.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all. As you see on this slide, I work for the European Commission in the Maritime Safety Unit. The previous slide said European Maritime Safety Agency. I have worked 7 years there, but I have changed for quite a long time ago. It's just to get it correct so nobody gets upset afterwards. I should start by saying thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I think it is a fantastic turnout. I should say thank you for the sponsors for the coffee breaks and the lunch. Excellent. And especially this slot, as said, maybe not the most popular, but see many new and many familiar faces, some partners in crime, but looking forward to interchange on this quite, I think, fundamental maritime safety topic. This is the introduction in the setup of this panel. Real-world challenges in finding a place of refuge for ships in need of assistance. And what do we do about that, and how have we gone about it? And yes, there are many sensitivities involved, but there is also progress involved. I will go through a little bit the process that we went through in Europe at the time before coming into the work in IMO internationally. And I should be very clear to say, I have just been told what to write from those that know. I'm just a civil servant, humbly trying to understand and learn, and I am learning a lot, and thank you for this morning. Very interesting presentations, giving rise to questions and new ideas. Many are saying that why, as usual, are EU going their own way, but we are not. It's absolutely the same aims here. And actually, it is a little bit same as many of the developments in IMO. Unfortunately, it's an accident that triggers things. In our case, it was the Flaminia. And it was a complicated one because she was actually outside any jurisdiction. And I got a phone call from the SOS rep at the time asking, who do I contact in France to deal with this? And I was a little bit taken aback because we can spot oil with satellites from the sky, but the SOS rep doesn't know his counterpart in France. So that triggered things into that we have an issue. We have to see how we can get the parties all together and start to talk and understand how we should deal with this. And it was quickly a realization that it's not only authorities, and that's, I deal with coastal states and also flag states in my portfolio issues, but it was quickly a realization, also from the authorities involved in the member states, that this needs full involvement of industry. So they were very quickly also around the table, all ship owners, insurers, ISU, everybody. And the approach was not spoken out, it became a common effort, to build a common understanding. And I would like to emphasize this because this morning you heard, as we hear many times, it's very important to talk to each other and it's people business and so on. And it is very true. So we started this in the EU context in 2013, just a couple of months after the accident with the Flaminia. And that gathered all member states, all stakeholders, with our safety agency involved to draft the operational guidelines. And they were adopted, or agreed, I should say, because they are non-mandatory in their character. There is legislation in Europe about places of refuge in the so-called Vessel Traffic Monitoring Directive. There are clear rules that the co-legislators have agreed, among them that there is a competent authority and there is independence of those dealing with the case and taking decisions. It's not a political decision. These are issues of policy level that we have then trickled down into how do we operationally do this and who are involved in taking a decision. They were finalized in January on the same day as we had the Modern Express. I don't know how that came about, but that was the case. So they were tested immediately. I leave that for the moment because I come back to it. At the same time, there was a declaration taken, as is the case many times for such occasions, especially with the political levels involved and the European Parliament involved. And they had many points, but among two core points was the pledge to continue to work. It was not the feeling that now we have guidelines, now we sit back, now we have done it. Was very much aware that it's no more than paper. So still. So what do we do more? One thing that everybody was agreeing on was to do tabletop exercises. And it was, and I will say something that maybe sounds strange, it was a demand, it was an idea and demand from both member states, authorities and industry that we should probably share this into the international context. Because we have spent a lot of time on this, and actually the original ideas for building the EU guidelines were the IMO guidelines at the time. But they took them to the next level. So, and the IMO guidelines invites that these are revised from time to time as experience is gained. So this is essentially about sharing experience for the international benefit. Of course, any ship owner, be it an EU flag, under EU flag or not, would probably like to see a handling similar wherever it happens, geographically. So that is the approach that was put forward. And that may also help in creating an even broader common understanding of what to do. The tabletop exercises are actually quite successful. I don't say this because they are hosted by member states. There are many involved, many are in the audience here. It's a team of the hosting member state, the previous exercise director, a few other authorities and industry planning it all. Quite big events, as many as in this room, and the point is that we are trying to do this in as close as possible to a real situation scenario as we can. There are many surprise injects. It's challenging the thought, and the whole purpose is to test the guidelines as much as possible and learn from that and adjust them as necessary. We have had 6. The last one was in Dublin a couple of weeks ago. Was very interesting, and I can say we are also changing the scenarios all the time. We have had container vessels, we have had oil vessels, we have had, the last scenario was actually involving what is on a topic on for the moment involving tankers that are sanctioned and how to deal with that. Just to be very clear, all the sanctions rules allow any authority to intervene with a sanctioned ship under a place of refuge situation, seeking assistance. There is nothing preventing that, because I read sometimes to the contrary. And then was the other path, and that was to bring this to IMO, essentially, as I said, sharing the experience. This was done to MSC 100. It's now some years ago, but my point with this slide is to show you not only the normal member states or states sponsoring this, but when you look towards the end, you see all the industry that were co-sponsoring it. At the time, that was not so usual. It's maybe more usual today, thankfully. But the point with this is that it was really showing everybody else that this was a real common effort. And this was accepted by MSC and put as a new work item for NCSR. And we had quite some discussions in NCSR. Quite of the many questions you may have or been thinking about recently, we probably had in there. My partner in crime in this, because I am not representing any state, I am working for an institution, was the current SOS rep. Stefan Henning was the coordinator for all this work. But with everybody who had been involved supporting this process. But we had the questions. Do you have to take a vessel? Is it legal? UNCLOS questions, the whole range. We went through it all. But we actually did that with a certain benefit, because everybody could also follow that and be automatically drawn into the reasoning of why we do this and how can we improve, in this case, the current IMO guidelines based on experience in one region. I've put here the heading, changing of mindsets. It's much about that. When we started, when the Flaminia started, and she was starting to ask for assistance, a place, the gut feeling was, no, she's on fire. I don't want this trouble. No, 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 no. But the mindset change is to not think no, but to think, how can we handle this? Saying no doesn't mean, as you well know, that this ship goes away. I have dealt with previous cases when we had nothing, like the Prestige. I was the desk officer in the commission at the time. We had no information. I should not say anything about that case, but maybe we learned a lot for how not to do it. So it's about that changing of mind and looking at it collectively. How do we deal with her? And yes, there might be a case where she is either so big that you physically have no place to take her, and you have to say no, but you have at least looked at her, and you can hand over to somebody who is following it that may be in a better position to handle her. And if she goes down, politically, which is where I work, I have also a commissioner who was asking me questions, if this happens, why didn't we do anything? And your minister will be in the same position. Yeah, we know that she was there, but we thought it was outside jurisdiction, so we didn't act. But the oil is still on your beach. It's not good enough answer today, politically or in media. So we are still in it together, all of us. So you see, the IMO guidelines have a setting the context, and you can read that it should be addressed as a practical problem which requires operational decisions involving both relevant authorities and the industry. This is already hinting at this important aspect of working together, forming an understanding for each other, also when we take and have difference of opinion. But it still doesn't solve it, you have to solve it. And for the operational guidelines, there is the same, and that is expressed slightly differently, but similar wording is there. As a matter of principle, each state involved in the operation should examine their ability to provide a place of refuge. That's for a region, and we are in the European Union context, so this is also part of being in the club. as in any club. You help, you try to solve things. And this one, unless deemed unsafe, there should be no rejection without inspection, was a long discussion, also in the context of the IMO guidelines. It doesn't mean that automatically somebody goes on board. It has to be carefully planned. This is where Salvage comes in, working closely with salvors on the scene. But it might be that authorities involved that are carrying the risk, that have to take a decision, would like to go on board, if it is feasible to do so, and have experts, technical experts, to do so, without delaying. It's all depending on the case, etc. I am not going to go through this nor the EU guidelines, but they are very similar in their structure. I can first say that they are supposed to be, I wouldn't say state-of-the-art interactive, but at least there are hyperlinks. When you click on the first part, section 2, action requested by the master, for masters, please click here, you come directly to that chapter. So they are a little bit interactive. And this IMO is doing very well. We are trying to do the same with the operational guidelines. This is probably techniques we can further improve, because it's not supposed to be 35 pages and it's hot and what should I do with 35 pages? I need to concentrate on the issue. It's supposed to be guidance. I have just highlighted for you in section 3, maybe what is a novelty within this. We have it in Europe under law. But in the IMO guidelines, there is also under actions expected of the coastal state that they appoint a competent authority. Somebody who is the recipient of the call. Somebody who maybe has a team around them, be it technical or legal, to deal with the request. It's a fundamental part. If you don't even know who to address, it is difficult. So that is a little bit of it was also quite a long discussion. They are guidelines, they are non-mandatory, but as I said before, the trick here is that everybody is involved, you take ownership, and then you are more committed to them. For the EU guidelines, I dare say, they're probably better implemented than any legislation we have, because of that. I will go a little bit more into section 4. As you see, there is a section there for international regional cooperation. That draws experience from the EU operational guidelines. But before going there, interesting is, and I'm not sure there are any other such sections in IMO guidelines, but there was a full awareness that there is a lot of media attention when things happen, especially with oil and disasters. And therefore, we have worked out a way, we have had actually training on this as well with experts in handling media, a chapter on that. And not having everybody involved sending out complete different messages, but trying to have one narrative going out. And today, more important than ever. And then section 6 is lessons learned. And that can be in the IMO context and national and regional debriefs. That's what we do when we do tabletop exercises. And this group that I am sharing gathers all the experts in Europe, from the European member states, together with industry, and we are discussing cases that they have had at national level, what can we learn from them, maybe cases involving the region, and other things that are directly relevant to the issue of place of refuge. Here is the one section where it has led to a bit of confusion. Yes, the IMO guidelines have taken inspiration from the EU guidelines, but I already explained you, we were sharing our experience. But for this chapter, we have used more of the operational part, especially in appendix to section 4, to give an idea for how that could look like also in other regions. Therefore, these are complementing the IMO guidelines, but for the regional situation. And one of the reasons for this is we have a system in Europe called the European Maritime Information Exchange System, or SafeSynet. That is not the case internationally. That is all the European member states wanting to have one system with all information about the ships. And all ships sailing on Europe will have to notify especially dangerous cargo. So I thought the panel this morning on the cargo owner was very interesting, but we have a system, especially when there is dangerous cargo on board, be it containers or oil or what it is, we have that in the system. We have had exercises with this. We have suggestions to even have for container ships where they are loaded, where are they located on board, the plans to be shared. And we have had test cases with that in the system. The whole idea is the last bullet point. Time is normally of essence. Quickly find the right and it's not that there is not information, but it's the pertinent information for handling the situation. And this system is scalable or can be tailor-made for these purposes. You may not need to know a post-take control history for that, handling that case, but it's there if you want it. This is the question put. Do the IMO EU guidelines make a difference? Well, challenges are well known. It's balancing between very many different interests. But, and maybe I'm provoking now, I apologize. We all are ordering the stuff. It's our demand that are the goods that are carried by ships. Everything. I don't think there is a ship sailing empty unless they have to. And also ports are earning for the commercial traffic in and out, or anybody else involved in this. And everybody is happy with that as long as it works. But when it doesn't work, it cannot be that nobody wants to deal with it. Maybe it's a human reaction, but it doesn't work here. That is what we are trying to do, and we are trying to balance this between the ship. I should maybe have added cargo, which is not the prime consideration, but it is not forgotten. Certainly in situations like a fire on container vessel, where is the fire and what's next to that fire before you send anybody on board, be it a salver or inspector team. So you don't have an explosion in your face because you didn't know. Which brings us to a very other different importance, and that's the accuracy of reporting dangerous cargo, but we leave that out for the moment. Yeah. Political concerns and public pressure I already mentioned. Is there a capacity to deal with her? Sensitive coastal ecosystems, there are many things to juggle. But it is about transparency and it's about coordination between multiple authorities and stakeholders to come to a solution. So we are providing, I think now, a global framework for handling requests for ships in need of assistance. They are also balancing between safety and environmental protection on the sites and all those involved. But it's encouraging this mindset to be prepared and start to think already, how can I handle it, instead of not handling it. And it highlights the cooperation between all involved. I'll jump this in interest of time, but just the middle one. We have in a lot of the tabletop exercises also looked at alternatives for where she could go or be taken. This is also contingency planning. Do they make a difference? I think, thankfully, we have in Europe not had so many cases. We had the Morning Express. We are trying to be prepared as much as we can with everybody involved. We are sharing experiences in EU, in IMO. We are trying to structure all of this, and we are trying to look at effective implementation. So I think we have a positive experience in the EU for this. I hear that it may not be the same elsewhere in the world, but maybe that is something we can address in the sense, can similar things be done elsewhere in the world? It's not exclusive for the EU region. The blueprint in which we do tabletop exercises can be used by others in other parts of the world. But I'm keen to learn what did we miss and what can we do more. With that, Mr. Chair, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Jakob. excellent overview of the position, but I think also some ideas as to what we might talk about in a minute. And I suppose, I mean, Jakob, you left us. I'm going to stick with you briefly before bringing in some of the other panels, because I think you've given us a fantastic expose of how it's all supposed to work, some examples of where it is working. Could I get you to perhaps think about what might not be working so well, and what both the industry and the authorities could do to improve that?
Thank you. I think one of the most hard things to do is to change a mindset. So while I put that up, it is not done overnight. We also have changes in administration, etc. So that is an ongoing work. And it's also partly why we do the tabletop exercises, to get everybody to focus and actually use the guidelines and together evaluate, would this work in a real situation? And we have a lot of people in the room who are dealing with this, including the salvors, but also authorities who have real cases experience. I think that it is gone a long way, but I also hear, and I think I understand, I see cases, I hear about cases where the first reaction is, no, we don't want to. It's there. And as I say, for me, it's a bit short-sighted, because it doesn't mean it goes away. And the Prestige, it was 40,000 tons of crude everywhere. I dare say that costed a lot more, still not cleared in courts, but that costs a lot more than maybe a bit of the collateral damage you will have to explain by taking her in somewhere and reduce that potential catastrophic situation. And I think by using such examples, that could help the thought process.
I think that's very valid, and that's, again, it comes back to the point I was making about we're possibly all sort of speaking to an echo chamber. We all know why the guidelines are a good idea, why people should comply with them, but it's the sort of the what if, what could go wrong, and it's educating people, perhaps using negative examples to say, well, actually just think about the sort of bigger picture. I'd like to bring in Helga, giving us a sort of the insurer perspective, you know, in terms of recent incidents that you've been involved in. What are the lessons that you've learned that could be used to sort of inform a change in practices?
We've seen, well, I just have to reiterate what's been said, that so the structure of the guidelines, we would say is good. The guidelines are there, they have a mechanism that could be implemented and used. What we see in some of the incidents that have occurred recently is that it's not having the desired effect, because they're actually not being necessarily followed as they should have been. When we are looking from the insurer side at the Port of Refuge issue, we're looking at either a situation where there's no available Port of Refuge, so the port state is just saying, we don't want to accept any vessel at all, or the process is very delayed. It can take a lot of time before you get a decision. It can take months, as we've seen. But we know that it's a complex issue, so it's not necessarily just that there needs to be an available port, but it needs to be a port that can actually handle the vessel as well. It needs to be the right port of refuge. So some of the experiences we've had from cases is where we provide information, we have experts appointed, we have salvors assisting, we follow the guidelines, but at the same time we receive some feedback maybe from the ports that they are maybe considering more political issues that was raised, commercial issues, instead of looking at how can we assist, how can we help bring in this vessel to safety. And I think that we've been looking a lot at delays in salvage in recent years. It's been a high focus for all of us, but now we're looking at, in many cases, delays in getting the ship into Port of Refuge. So you have a salvor there assisting the vessel, but then you don't really have anywhere to bring her in. And it's a concern for us as insurers because it can mean the difference between if a vessel is a total loss or not. It's a concern for cargo owners. It is a concern for salvors. And of course, it's a concern for the owners as well. So definitely we see that from some of the recent experiences. The idea is there that the guidelines are there, but it's not really being followed as it should.
Is it too easy to say no?
Maybe it is, and I think that the difference between the EU guidelines and the IMO guidelines, one very important difference is exactly the obligation that you have, or it is a stronger sense of obligation under the EU guidelines than it is under the IMO guidelines. So while I think the regulatory work that has been done preparing the IMO guidelines is good, maybe there must be a way to apply more pressure so that it's not so easy to say no, because that might have been an issue.
We might come back to that a little bit further on, but I'd just like to bring in Charo, because obviously, Salvage, you are absolutely in the forefront of this and in your decision making. What do you feel you need most in terms of decision making regarding places of refuge?
I see Jacob put it on his presentation, there were just no rejection without inspection. Because before they say no, but now the EU islands, they lie to the authority, competent authority who is rejecting to get into the port. They have to allow to make an inspection before. Send a team, can be salvors or can be the proper authorities, but they have to go and see how the situation is before saying, sorry, not my house. And about Prestige, which is Spain, but the first also port of the modern express recall was Bilbao, which is Spain. So we feel so guilty that we say, yes, okay, come on, come here. So we were the first trial. So they are working, It depends, okay, we are talking in Europe. Europe, we are all conscious, political, it's hard, but they are accepting, and it's a lot of lessons learned. The exercises is a show of this. I know the Commission is bringing others, I think other countries from the worldwide to learn and to see if the IMO can be applied all worldwide. So little by little, for salvage it's difficult. If you make a salvage and you are 3 months running away, nobody wants you. There's plenty of cases like this. Europe is the difference, but we need to, again, give some more training to authorities in general.
So do you see most European countries following that,
Yes.
that principle?
They have the prevention and the zero net or whatever. We don't want disasters. The environment is a talk.
And what about, we were talking this morning about sort of information, in particularly when you're dealing with, say, a container ship. Do you find that as Salvage, you get the information that you need?
We try, but sometimes it's not. Okay, because the problem also, I think Lynn mentioned before, is the HATMAT, the hazardous materials. People don't report. Sometimes it's miscargo, sometimes it's because it's lost. Also, we miss the drawings of the vessels who is in distress because to see what the problem is or what is going to happen with this vessel. If just remains at sea or if fishes, they need to be urgently at a port of refuge. Because, okay, you ask a port of refuge, but you have to ask for a reason. That's true. You cannot ask to get into a port because you want. It has to be a reason to get into it because sometimes you can sort it out at sea. Yeah? So, yes, we need information. Information is top for everything, I think. Yeah? To take the proper decisions, us and the authorities and everybody involved. Also be nice, and they are most important issue because they gather information from the vessel, from the owner, from the salvors, and also they put the money. It's an important issue. Yeah, so.
Will, as a sort of consultant, I suppose you're not so much detached, but maybe you can sort of talk more freely than the sort of the immediate stakeholders. But what are the sort of, can you tell us in Brookes Bell's experience, the positives that you've seen and perhaps just some of the negatives over recent years?
I mean, I think a lot of the cases we've dealt with recently have gone to one port in the world, which is Dubai, and it's taken time to go into port, to find port of refuge to satisfy the conditions. But I think the point with that is, and it feels like right now they're actually chasing cases. So when there's a ship on fire, they'll make every effort to contact the vessel to try and bring it into their port because I think they see the commercial advantage of it. So I think, to me, what that suggests is that with the right kind of messaging, the right education in terms of how the ports view these casualties, it's not as hard to deal with as maybe they might think. And there's financial benefit from them. I think one of the things with Dubai is that over the years, they've also developed, well, they haven't, but the facilities have been developed to deal with the waste. And that's the big aspect. There's dealing with the casualty, there's a casualty coming in, but there's how do you deal with the waste? How do you deal with the distressed cargo? Do you have enough space? Because it's going to take a lot of space in a port, potentially for months. And not all ports are able to give that space up. So it's how you deal with that and how they are willing to, how they can be prepared for it. And I think the point of it is there's financial benefit, certainly, and I think Dubai will probably agree with that.
So I'd hate to be sceptical, but are you effectively saying that money talks?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that is certainly, the UK club. We've just had 2 recent cases where, as Will has said, we found a certain port in the Middle East very receptive and very eager to help us, and they did help us, but it cost a lot of money.
Right.
And perhaps that's the balancing exercise we have to deal with, because on one of those cases we had Scopic running at $500,000 a day. I mean, it was absolutely insane. We had to get the ship into a port, and so it's a question of how do you stop the bleed, and you end up just finding a port that will take it, but it comes with a price.
Yeah, and I think over time you'd hope that other ports see that opportunity, and then you get a bit of competition, and at least you've got some offers on the table that you can levy against each other, like you would in any part of casualty management.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about the sort of the regional variations that we're seeing, because there's certainly a theme that if you're in the EU, you're probably going to have a good experience. Elsewhere, perhaps it's a little bit more patchy. Helga, in your experience, are there sort of good regions outside the EU or regions that are more challenging? What would be your thinking on that?
Well, I would say, as has been mentioned, Dubai has proven to be a good place to come in with a vessel to port of refuge. But we do see, and I'm not going to highlight specific countries because it is, as mentioned, it's a very complex picture. But we do see that there are areas in the world where it's very difficult to get a port of refuge. And I know people here have experience with cases recently where it's been taking months, and you do end up going to Dubai instead. But it's, as you said, money talks, and if you're going to be in a position where you can commercialize a port of refuge and have all the equipment and the industry available that you need for the waste management, you need to invest a lot of money in it in advance. And not all places are prepared to do this. Not all places know how to do it. And the question is, do we as an industry demand that they have this facility available everywhere? Or do we need to look at it in a different way and see that there will be some places where you can't bring in a vessel with 20,000 containers on board on fire? You will have to go to designated ports if that means that you're towing. I don't know, this is more just kind of a question from my side. Or would we expect that you would have global ports having the capacity and the ability to take in these vessels just because they do have some infrastructure there? Will we require and kind of pressure them to do these kind of investments? Is that something we should expect from them because they are doing trade? As you said, they are the reason why the vessels are out there carrying cargo. Should we then reasonably expect them to facilitate when something goes wrong? But it's also the as we've seen, the European system works because we have invested time, money, people into it. We have the SOSREP system, we have similar systems in different countries as well. This is of course something that would be beneficial to have, and it would be also when you need the competent authority that is required under the guidelines. So some sort of investment into at least the authorities, the competent, to be there. But then the question is, how far would you go in acquiring the investment into facilities?
I think emphasising something that we've all thought for a long time, that we're very blessed in the UK with the SOSREP system, and indeed with SOSREP, but it does make it, I suspect, quite a lonely job when the sole decision rests on that one particular person. Jakob, I mean, when you were talking about how the EU guidelines developed into the IMO, you talked about that you were sharing the experience internationally. You got so far in terms of the guidelines, but what do you think you could take further from the EU position to the rest of the world? And I suppose, how would you do it, given that the rest of the world is so fractured?
As I hinted at, would I have had unlimited resources? Yes, I would probably take the model of the tabletop exercises we are doing in Europe and set them up with the relevant parties in other regions of the world. And use the IMO guidelines that are there for everybody has been working on. I mean, it was a big group, working group and correspondence group. And to promote them, to explain them, there is indeed an element of educating, familiarizing, and sharing the experience over quite some years that we have had now, and for their benefit. And equally explain that their flagships would be benefiting in this part of the world. So there can be an expectation in their part of the world. And ultimately, it is actually to the benefit of the whole sector, to the whole trade, not least the environment. We are doing all of this in order to avoid a bigger environmental disaster, which will set back, as we have painfully learned in Europe, everything a lot. It changes I can tell you, it changes the political agenda overnight. And so I think there is that part, continue to share, to continue to try and explain and change the mindset, and to work together. Also ask the questions. If you are wondering, or you feel that how should I deal with this, then ask those that are involved, how do we address this together? That's how we started. Very simple questions. Who do I contact? What would you like to know? Where can I find the information? How do I start to look at if I have, and it doesn't have to, depending on the situation, have to be a port. They are called places of refuge. Maybe I have an anchorage, that could be. Maybe I can find an interim solution to stabilize her. There are all of these parts. We should not just think that it is the next port and they are suffering. That's not necessarily the part. And I would completely agree with Helga. If you are part of the game, you are also part of the problems when they come. And I think it's almost a societal responsibility to handle.
I mean, maybe this is something you're doing, but could you invite strategic international states to observe tabletop exercises and educate them in that way?
We already do, actually, and that is how we have started a little bit. At the latest one, if I remember correctly, we had Canada, we had most states, or many states around the Black Sea, some from the Mediterranean, non-EU states, shared sea bases. We do, of course, have the UK. You saw what I put on the list back in the days. There have been changes in this country thereafter, as you know, but we are working very close with the UK. Because it's not a barrier, we have the international guidelines under IMO. We have shared waters, the channel between the Irish Sea, everything. So that is not the issue. So we are trying, as observers, to come in and start. And I have to say, in Dublin a couple of weeks ago, I was very happy to see Canadian authorities sharing their view and how they are doing it. So gradually doing this. It will be difficult to have all 174 states in the room, but
I see that. When you mentioned the UK, for a wonderful moment, I'd forgotten that we were no longer part of the EU. There we are.
I didn't want to say that.
I'd like to move on to just some sort of specific challenges, and I think we've already touched on this, but I'm going to bring you in on this, Will. Container ships, and obviously we've had some experiences recently of fires and then providing the information to the authorities. How can you better improve the provision of information of what's in the boxes to the authorities?
I mean, I think one of the difficulties is, I mean, there's misdeclared cargo, but there's also cargo that's properly declared, but has things in it that doesn't quite, say it in the title. So, for instance, on one of the vessels that we dealt with, there was a DG container that everyone knew about. Above the DG container, there was a container full of what was called kids' toys, but that was full of batteries. And so now you've got a DG container burning with batteries above it. And so and there's been a lot of talk in the last 3 years about batteries generally in EVs and in all sorts of, in containers as well. And I think having more knowledge about that, about kind of what's in that box beyond DGs and probably categorising a certain amount of batteries in it. Because I think a lot of some at least of the container ship fires we've seen recently have started with batteries somewhere. And those they actually could be inside a hole potentially. And that's happened, and that's the worst thing that could happen. So having a bit more knowledge about these items that sort of look like something but really is something else.
Which opens up a question that's burning in every sense of the word across the whole industry. It's a problem that we face in starting the casualty, but also in then dealing with it afterwards. Yeah. We mentioned sanctions earlier, and I'm just interested in Charo and if that has crossed your path as a salver and how you dealt with it, how you're supposed to proceed in that scenario.
Mm-hmm. We have found that sanctions fashion now. There's sanctions all over. So as salvers, you have a casualty, you intend to do the salvage, but first you have to check if the vessel is a sanctioned vessel or sanctioned cargo. And okay, you go to your PNI, you go to the authorities, you think you are doing the best, the vessel is sanctioned but not in EU, so you can do it, but then we discover that you can be sanctioned in UK or the States, and you think you are doing the proper thing, doing the salvage, and everybody has told you that you are not in default because nobody's going to give you an indemnity, but they are going to think that you are not in default in this case, but then you have 2 years after you discover you have a claim against you in the States or something. So I think we need to be realistic that this is happening more and more. We are not ready because we think we are, but we need to check if vessel has sanctions all over the world, not just with the area where this casualty is happening. I know there is proper clubs that they are dealing with 3,000 of sanctions per year. So we need to check that too. So it's not a question also of salving the vessel or keeping ourselves in indemnity or indemnified before proceeding, but also to be reassured that nothing is going to happen. Even if you're salving the vessel, you are having troubles.
I suppose at the bottom line, you want to get paid as well.
And also nobody's going to pay you, but you are going to be in jail. Yeah?
It is a fair concern, I suppose. I think we should sort of we've highlighted a few of the sort of problems, but let's try and fill up the glass a little bit. And what do you think we could do to make it better? Helga, in your experience, how do you think collaboration could improve between the stakeholders and the coastal authorities?
I think that, as Jacob has said, using what has proven to be a success or at least something that seems to work very well in Europe, using the tabletop exercises to those who might be interested. It's, as we've said, it's difficult to put an obligation on the states to participate, but at least present an invitation. But I also think that we as an industry, we're sitting here, we are experts in this room. We all have experience with handling these types of port of refuge cases. Most of you in this room, I think we are in a position where we need to provide the information that we have, the experience we have, the concerns we have, but also the knowledge. Somehow we can relay this to the authorities, the different coastal states, that we think it would be beneficial to us as an industry to have this information, to be able to assist them. IUMI as a policy organization can work and has been involved in working with the IMO guidelines and developing these. IG has been active. ISU have their concerns and need to put those ahead as well. And I believe that if we as an industry can come together, raising our concerns, but also providing some input on what do we need. We need specific requests from the ports as to why are they hesitant to accept the vessel. What is the concern from the port authorities? Is it a specific risk analysis? Are they afraid of the environmental risk? Or is it political? Is it commercial? If we have the answers to these questions, it's easier for us to provide the information that they need. And I also think that it's important that we have improved preparedness from the coastal authorities as well. So we need, I think, to get together as an industry and try and apply some pressure on this issue towards the port authorities, where we don't see that this is being taken, I wouldn't say taken seriously, but at least not implemented enough, and see if there's something we can do together as an industry.
Same question to you, Will, but in particular, I'm going to look at a sort of the aspect that we suffered was the speed of the decision making and the cost that it's being incurred while that decision making is being taken. Is there anything you think that could speed up, that we could do to speed up the decision making, or is that completely outside our control?
I mean, it seems so far not much has worked, in the sense that, you know, every casualty seems to go the same way, which it takes months for it to go into a port. I think what we sort of know is that the port of refuge, or the decision to take the vessel into a port, becomes the bottleneck. And I think as a consultant, as a P&I club, I think it's our job to try and get ahead of the Salvage with these issues, and I think to communicate as early and with as much clarity as possible with whoever the selected, what we think would be the best port of refuge. So to try and get in touch with them as early as possible and try and share information with them, so there's a preparation for the operation even before the fire's put out. And I think sometimes that's the issue, is that we sort of wait for the vessel to be ready to start communicating. And as much as possible, the Salvage have a job to do, and we have a job to do in the background to try and get that progressing as quickly as possible.
Would you agree with that, Charo? Is that
We will do it. Advance before, decide. Well, normally when you make a salvage, depending on the area of the world you are, you know, you have some ports that they are going to agree, or authorities who are have more knowledge of what is a casualty, so they will be allowed, and others that simply, whatever you say, they are going to say no. So it's good that the EMSA and Commission is helping, for example, Algeria, and Syria, Morocco, and these ports, but never, always say no. It's good if somebody explain why, and it's also good for them, because their solution is going to go to them. I think worldwide, it's not balanced, so it's not easy. We can render salvage worldwide, but we cannot have port of refuge worldwide. Not now, and not on firm basis.
Before we open it up to the audience, I'm going to ask Jakob a final question. I think I know the answer, but maybe you can tell me why the answer is no. But could we go further and make it an obligation on ports to accept, on countries to accept ships as a place of refuge?
As a legislator in Europe, I'm tempted to say yes. But internationally, I'm not sure. It is a very, very difficult question, because it is a national competence as a port and coastal state at the end. There have been ideas floating, could we create some sort of mechanism where everybody chips in and that helps, you know, some guarantees. Knock on wood, and the audience will and the panel will maybe disagree with me, but we don't have very many. We have to be proportionate with this. And I have to say, the ports have been involved in all the work we have been doing. The European ESPO, Seaports Organization in Europe, and have contributed very well to these whole discussions. And yes, there are concerns, but whether we are ready to legislate in that way, and whether that, what would it change? Would it mean that if they don't take it, what do? We go to court still, and you have still her sailing out there? Yes, I am legally trained, but I'm trying to think practically. Where does it lead us? Does it change anything?
I think you're probably right. It's the enforcement, isn't it? I suppose it's the problem with a guideline is it instantly has no teeth. If you make it an obligation, people might think it has teeth, although they don't actually realise that the teeth are behind. I don't know, mixing all my analogies, but that actually doesn't have teeth in principle.
I appreciate that, and all guidelines are the same, but they are also there, and this was the point I tried to make, to create that common understanding. And that is an implementation matter. If you get everybody to commit to this, it can work even better than legislation.
And I think
We are maybe not there yet, but we are trying. The alternative is to do nothing, and I don't think that is an alternative.
And you're right, I think we tend to focus on the cases where it hasn't worked, and we ignore that there are actually plenty of cases, probably even outside, you know, I'm an IG insurer and Helga as well. There are probably lots of scenarios, smaller boats, smaller scenarios where it's working absolutely fine. So I think it's point. We've got about 12 minutes left. I'm very sorry, Will, but I think we might have to skip your presentation, because I think it'd be really good to hear questions from the audience. And I'm almost going to throw a question at the audience, because we were supposed to have a representative of Dubai here to talk to the, if you like, the coastal authority. Unfortunately, he was unable to make it. But I might just sort of ask whether there is anyone in the audience who does represent a coastal authority who's prepared to speak to the balance that you strike between ensuring safety and protecting the environment and maintaining smooth operations. And I see a hand going up right in front of me.
Thank you very much. I'm not directly representing a port authority, but I'm Jasmine Fichte from Dubai, so obviously I have to make a comment. We are working currently on not we as Dubai, but we as the Emirates, we're working currently on an exercise what I think might really help. But before I get into that, I would like to make a comment to Will about Jebel Ali port as the money-grabbing port, because there is
I didn't say it was a money-grabbing port.
I understand, but I would like to clarify. Because I find that a little ungrateful. So literally what happened, if you look back at the situation, it was 2018, we had the Maersk port on. Dubai port was as not interested as any other port, but because of the good relationship with the Maersk, it was undertaken, and it was very positive. But what you have to understand in Dubai, as in any other country, Dubai is a city and it's one emirate. Dubai has no right to approve, to give the approval for a vessel to come in. That comes on federal level. Federal level has no financial interest, but the Federal Maritime Administration, they're very clear. They're saying we are, especially in the UAE and in the Middle East, we are extremely dependent on shipping traffic, and the relationship goes both ways. So on that point to say, when a vessel is in distress, we have to help. Now the good point was with the Maersk Hornum, there was the experience, and it was Maersk and it was Polygreen, who's here today as well. There was a good experience, so the government got the first feeling of trust, we can do it. And everybody who knows Dubai, you know about how important tourism is for us, how important the beaches are. We have shallow waters. Our DP world, especially Jebel Ali, is extremely congested. So obviously there are heavy risks involved. Then we had now, in the last year, we had 3 casualties, like literally one by one. And every time, what Jacob was saying, every time we have a debrief after, every time we're trying to speed up, to literally make the processes a bit more efficient, run it a bit more. Unfortunately, in the Emirate, the way we are constituted, we cannot have a SOS rep, we cannot have somebody on federal level telling one of the ports you have to take her. Now, on that point, I like what Helga was saying today. Jacob, you speak a lot from the point, ports don't want her. We see it the other way. What about a port wants her because they see the commercial benefits, but we feel that is not safe because they simply haven't got the experience. So after the last, we got the Van High, and the Van High was a situation where the first time we approached the government, we were told, Jasmine, are you crazy? That vessel is cooked. We will know where we will take her. And then it took 3 or 4 expert reports, and we were surprised how surprisingly stable she still was. But it took a long time to bring her in, and we didn't understand why the P&I club, we felt the P&I club is shopping around and spending too much time instead of just taking this window. And for our government, we were worried about the situation, because that ship is cooked. She was like seriously cooked. But on after that, the government, not Dubai, the government came up with an initiative that we are currently exploring to say, why don't we as government, we officially recognize a port of refuge. We're setting very high standards, so that is for me a good way to avoid or cut out certain ports where I feel they're not fulfilling the criteria, they're just in it for the money. We're setting high standards, we are vetting, and maybe not just us as a government, but together with the IG or with the ISU, we are vetting a port. A port would be officially recognized as a port of refuge. So the next time when there's a casualty and a claims handler in the club is looking at potential ports, they feel we don't need to do the vetting. We were also thinking of a kind of ranking, because on the Van High, as we felt the respective clubs taking its time, we said, why don't you speak with the clubs of the previous 2 casualties? So we share the experience. Why don't we share the experience? We have rankings for everything these days. Why don't we have a ranking for port of refuges, where the next one, when we are looking at, we can see what was well done, what was not well done. So that is something we're working on from our side. I think it's a fantastic product. I wanted to talk about it with you, Jacob. Captain Ibrahim was supposed to come here, unfortunately he was held back. But that is the positive thing from our side, to say we are trying to find ways to make it a bit faster.
Thank you, Jasmine. Will, do you just want
Yes, I mean, sure. The point for me is not, I've never used the term money grabbing, it's certainly not my intention to present it that way. The point for me mostly is the fact that having had the Maersk Conan, I think you'd probably agree that the Port of Dubai realised that these things could be handled. And with all the correct logistics behind it, it's something that's feasible. And of course there's commercial interest, because why else would you do it, right? So it's not to say it's money grabbing and it's unethical behaviour. It's simply to say, I think there's something that other ports can learn from the way Dubai does things, because these casualties aren't quite as scary as they first look. In the same way as you just described the One High, you look at it the first time and you say it's cooked, but when you look into it, you find out that you can deal with it, and now it is in Dubai. And so the point is to encourage more authorities to look deeper in these casualties, to find that actually they can help, and if they can help, there ought to be a commercial compensation. Sorry, correct. It's completely reasonable. There's no issue with that. Everyone in this room exists in a realm where they have to make money, myself included. So it's not criticism in that sense.
I think that's absolutely right, and I would say, I think amongst the IG, Dubai is quite high on the list in terms of somewhere you can go where you have a problem, and we've had good experience there. So, Jakob, I think you wanted to just come in.
Yes, thank you for bringing that forward, and I'm sure that we can learn from how you are looking at it from that standpoint. I was never suggesting that ports are not in this together with all the others. They are. and they are willing to do their part. But as mentioned, everybody would like to have clarity on what we are dealing with, which I think is a fair ask. The European legislation already demands from all the EU member states, EEA member states, in fact, meaning also Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. I don't have so many ports. To declare ports that could be used for as areas that could be used for a place of refuge. Some have actually declared their entire coast because it depends so much on the case. And others have more specific points, anchorages, areas in and around the port to which they would consider in a situation should they be asked. So it is partly already regulated in that way, but it's still a prerogative of any coastal state or the authority involved to say no, I cannot. The point is, that should not be the first reaction. That should be the reaction after careful consideration. And when you cannot, who can? Again, she is not disappearing because there is a no.
I think we've got time for one more question or point.
Hello.
No.
Does it work? Yes, I don't know. It's actually a comment, not really a question, but you asked in the beginning to Jacob, where does it go wrong, and later on you said how to make it better, and actually it's a question and the answer was together. But what we see, and we have experienced ourselves, is that multiple authorities which are involved can create problems. In the UK, the SOSREP is a single point of contact and decision making, and we see other coastal states still operating with multiple authorities, coastal authorities, the municipality, all kind of environmental officers, etc., etc. And they not always cooperate in the best way together. So from my side, it would be a call to Jacob and to the EU, find a system on European level that we got a single point of contact per country who can decide without any politics involved. That's the next thing you don't want.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And the comment I made before about SOSREP is a model that I think a lot of us would like to see followed elsewhere, but Rome wasn't built in a day. Would anyone else like to raise a point or a question? I can see a hand over there. Yeah.
Very good afternoon to all of you. I think this conversation would not be complete if I were not to add my feedback. My name is Captain Helga. I am from Directorate General of Shipping, India. For all the major operations, starting with MSC ELSA 3, Vanai 503, Fulda, and Inter-Asia Tenacity. So all these 4 incidents happened within a span of 1 month, and they were all coordinated by us. And the very fact that none of the incident resulted in a major oil pollution shows the kind of response that was initiated by the Indian authorities. And what Mr. Jacob Terling said, when you are part of the game, you are also part of the problem. And after the incident, we have realized that we don't have the mechanism to identify a place of refuge in India. So this matter was taken up by the highest office in India, the PMO's office. And we are in the process of identifying at least one place of refuge, or we would say place of assessment. That sounds more positive and encouraging, one on west coast and one on east coast, because a sizable shipping traffic passes around the western coast. And especially this Vanai 503 poses a very significant challenge for all of us. It almost was on the verge of running aground. And we had to load the salvage through the Indian naval helicopter. And in India, if you are making a foreign national boat through a defense helicopter, the approval has to come from the defense minister. So this was taken also in a very, very short span of time, in the evening hours of the day the tow line was connected and the vessel was eventually pulled out. And for next 2 months, the vessel was kept safely under tow. So the interagency coordination was there. We understand this place of refuge is a major issue that we are working on, and none of this will work unless and until we have a very close coordination between the Salvage, the P&I Club, and the coastal state authorities. We must understand that we are all part of the same problem, and unless and until we don't work together, we will never be able to achieve the desired objective. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good point, and I don't want to take liberties on behalf of Jakob, but perhaps an invitation to the next tabletop exercise for India could follow.
I'm looking for the sponsors, yes.
I think, alas, we are out of time. But all I will do is just thank all of the four panellists, apologise to Will for the fact that we practiced the presentation overnight, but I think actually the debate for me was very interesting, and it gave us more time to air some of these issues. A lot of things to take away. I think obviously the challenge of getting accurate information is something we in the industry have to really take on. I think we have to be a little bit pragmatic in terms of where we're looking at ports of refuge. I think we will end up sort of identifying our favourite ports as we go along. But really, as Jakob said, it's about the mindset, it's about education and familiarisation, and that's something I'm sure we can all agree to work on.
Alan, thank you so much for expertly moderating that session. Thank you so much to those valuable contributions to panelists. Thank you.